Okay, so we've gone through and discovered our wireless networks. We've used our GPS mapping to get their locations. The next step is then going through and doing wireless traffic analysis and determine any vulnerabilities that may be in this network. And we're going to do this a couple different ways. The first thing that we'll do is actually look for vulnerabilities. And this can be done just like we normally do on our wired networks. And again, our whole purpose here is to determine an appropriate strategy for attacking the network. The other thing too here that you need to remember, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, is that again, this is wireless. So the traffic itself is just flowing through the air and it isn't serialized, which makes it extremely easy to sniff and analyze the packets. The next step of attack is then going through and doing a little bit more in-depth reconnaissance. We'll be looking for SSIDs, whether they're hidden or being broadcasted. We'll also take a look at access points. How many are there? We'll try to discover the encryption being utilized as well as the authentication that they're trying to use. Now, some folks ask, well, Dale, why do we need to know how many access points they have? Well, twofold. First of all, it gives us a kind of a layout of the network infrastructure itself, but more importantly, I'm going to be looking to see if all the access points have been patched. A lot of times, especially when the companies have multiple access points, they may do firmware upgrades for one or two and they may forget one. That could be my door into your network. And there's even more cool tools out there that will help us to determine all these reconnaissance requirements or issues. Those include things that we've seen already, including Wireshark, because again, packets are just going through the network. Wireshark can sniff that out. Now we might need some additional plugins. We'll talk about one of the more popular ones here a little bit later on. But we also have some very specific products out there for wireless, including Air Magnet, OmniPeak, and AirSnort. We interrupt this program to talk to you about cards. No, not these type of cards. I'm talking about wireless cards. When you're trying to implement an attack against a network via Wi-Fi, choosing the right Wi-Fi card is extremely important because some applications won't work correctly, or I should say they only work correctly with certain types of cards. And it also depends on what the attacker is trying to accomplish. For example, by default, Windows can listen on the network but doesn't have the capability of injecting data packets, where Linux actually has the ability to inject and listen. Boy, that looks like a painful looking picture. So when it comes to cards and your choice of cards, you need to understand a couple things. First of all, there are two manufacturers of a card. There is the manufacturer of the brand of card, and then there's the manufacturer of the chipset of the card. Knowing that the card manufacturer and model isn't necessarily enough information to choose your Wi-Fi card. You've got to know about the chipset. Now, a lot of manufacturers don't like to reveal their chipsets, but don't worry. Very easy to determine a chipset. You can simply do a search on the internet. You can look at the Windows driver file names because often the driver name itself has the chipset in it. You can check the manufacturer's page, really drill into the specs of the card. And the other thing you need to be careful about is that many times a manufacturer of a card will change the chipset while keeping the same model number. So in some cases, I've seen folks actually pop the covers off so they can actually look at the chips. Often the chipset number can be seen directly or it's printed directly on the chipset itself. Now you'll also want to verify the chipset capabilities. What I mean by that is that if the chipset's not compatible with the operating system or it doesn't meet the requirement of the application, it may be of no use to you. You'll also want to make sure that drivers are available. You'll also want to determine if the drivers have been updated or if they're available for the different operating systems, especially when it comes to Linux. Now, one of the more famous cards out there was an old PCMCIA card that was called the Orionco Gold card. In this case here, you can see that the manufacturer was Proxima, but the chipset was Orionco. And the reason why it was so popular is you probably can't see it, but down there where it has the name Proxima, on the far left, there's a little cap, and that cap could be used to attach an external antenna. Oh, such as a Yagi. Back in my day, I actually had one of these that I plugged into my HP iPac. Now, go figure, I was able to sniff networks with Mini Stumbler, a Yagi, and this card. It was really quite cool. Now, one of the more